Just after midnight on October 17, 1987, two men were walking along Halls Lane in Kitchener. They had met in a downtown bar. The suspect offered the other man a ride home. The suspect had a fair complexion, shoulder-length hair, and a stocky build. For some reason, the suspect suddenly turned on the victim.
You right or what? What'd you do that for?
He punched and kicked the victim and only stopped when he saw a vehicle approaching. The suspect was about 6 feet tall, with fair complexion and shoulder-length hair.
If you have any information about this assault or any serious crime, call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-265-2222. You will not have to reveal your name or testify in court. You may be eligible for a cash reward of up to $1,000. Remember, crime doesn't pay. Crime Stoppers does.
Eclipse in 7 years. Canadians from Atlantic Canada to Ontario have been seeing the entire eclipse cycle, while Westerners can only see parts of it. An eclipse occurs when the moon passes through the Earth's shadow. This moon in full view just before the eclipse began. Several minutes later, part of the moon is blocked out as it begins its journey through the Earth's shadow. And this, a total eclipse with the moon completely hidden. While a total eclipse isn't as rare as a blue moon, it is an infrequent phenomenon. The next total lunar eclipse won't be visible in this part of the world for 40 years. San Francisco Giants pitcher Dave Dravecky refused to concede today that his career was over. Understandable for a young man who had made a remarkable comeback after surgery to remove a cancerous tumor in his left arm, also his pitching arm. He was responding to questions today in Montreal after being released from hospital. Dravecky collapsed last night, falling face forward on the mound at Olympic Stadium. He fractured a bone in that same pitching arm. Dravecky is back home in California tonight, prepared to take life as it comes. Rob Folds reports.
Dave Dravecky left Montreal today, his left arm in a sling and...
A man is killed after being struck by a train.
And ambulance workers keep up the fight for improved services.
From CKCO TV News, the Ontario Report.
Good evening, I'm Diana Otteson.
And I'm Jim Haskins. Well, it was a rare sight and certainly a grand night to see it. Across Ontario, millions gazed skyward in order to watch a total lunar eclipse, the first one in many years. Here's how it looks now. The total eclipse is over, and the moon is slowly coming out of the shadow of the Earth. The whole process should be complete just before 2 o'clock in the morning. Earlier tonight, as promised, the clouds moved away in most areas, giving viewers near perfect conditions. Steve Hooper reports.
They gathered in backyards or just stood in the streets in clusters looking at the sky as the moon gradually disappeared. In Professor Ray Koenig's backyard in Waterloo, they first noticed something happening about 9:20 as the left side of Luna flattened. Koenig, who teaches astronomy at Wilfrid Laurier University, said that the earliest people had lots of myths but no real idea of what caused an eclipse, but the ancient Greeks knew and put their observations to scientific use.
They were able to determine, A, that the Earth was spherical in shape by observing this shadow on the moon, and they were able to determine the size of the moon compared to the size of the Earth by that arc. You know, they were able to guess this roughly the moon was 1/4 the size of the Earth as a result.
Outside of our CKCO studios, an interested group watched the celestial show, and a camera plus some editing enabled us to put together a speeded-up version of the eclipse. The total eclipse will end at 11:56, and the moon will be out again in its full glory at 1:53. Steve Hooper, CKCO TV News.
A 27-year-old man was killed last night when he was hit by a freight train in the town of Essex. Police say the man wandered onto a section of track in the middle of town in spite of warnings from people that a train was coming.
27-year-old Jack Rogers ignored these warning lights last night and wandered onto the tracks in the middle of downtown Essex. Police aren't sure if Rogers miscalculated the speed of the oncoming train or if he thought he was safely out of the way. Witnesses say he ignored warnings to get off the tracks.
He waved, he just stood there like this and he got hit. And I seen him go flying in the air over that way. So I went running to get the police.
Police say Rogers left this convenience store with another man just before the accident.
There was a train coming and he seemed to think he could make it across.
Residents say 8-10 freight trains travel along this stretch of track every day, many at speeds approaching 60 kilometers per hour. Residents say they would like slower speed limits imposed on the trains, but rail officials say this crossing is safe. The last fatal accident at this rail crossing was in 1968. Investigators say they do not believe Rogers was trying to commit suicide. There have been unconfirmed reports that the victim had been drinking at a nearby tavern, but at this point, police are calling the mishap an accident. No charges will be laid. In Essex, Rick Walker, CKCO TV News.
There will be a coroner's inquest into the death of a man killed in an explosion at a Toronto meatpacking plant. 64-year-old Clifford Hoover died after ammonia leaked from a cracked pipe and exploded at a Canada Packers plant on Monday night. It was the second fatal leak at that plant in 7 years. The company says it still doesn't know whether or not the two accidents are related. Large quantities of ammonia are used by municipalities as a coolant in meatpacking plants, cold storage facilities, as well as in arenas. And while deadly leaks are not common, emergency officials say safety procedures are in place.
This ammonia leak happened 2 months ago. It was a break in a pipe. No one was hurt, and although Cambridge fire teams were on the scene all night, an evacuation wasn't necessary. At the J.M. Schneider meatpacking plant in Kitchener, ammonia is used to keep the product at proper temperatures while it's on the shelf. Vice President of Operations John Lauer says the company has 8 to 10 minor leaks each year. Leaks that only require repairs and no evacuation of workers. A trained response team is always ready.
And we have a central area where they all locate and they get dressed in the necessary equipment, both breathing apparatus and uniforms to protect their entire bodies. And they move into the emergency area and make the necessary repairs. They contain a leak if it should be a very serious problem. We have never really had that kind of emergency develop at J.M. Schneider's.
Fire crews help train the response team. Chief Bill Hayden says ammonia is only dangerous when a person